July 12, 1942. Munich, Germany. The soft hum of an old printing press fills the attic, its rhythmic whirring a secret kept from the world below. Dust particles swirl in the thin beams of light cutting through the small window, illuminating the spines of books piled high against the walls. In the center of the room, a modest wooden table holds stacks of freshly printed pamphlets, pages filled with words too dangerous to exist in a world under Nazi rule. Hans Scholl stands at the press, his hand steady as he feeds another stack of paper into the machine. The press is old, not built for speed, but it is enough to get the job done. Every sheet that emerges is a silent act of rebellion, an unspoken refusal to accept the monstrous regime consuming their country. In another corner of the attic, his younger sister Sophie watches closely, a quiet determination in her eyes. She is not just his sister, she is his ally. Together, they have decided to take a stand. The Nazi Party's chokehold on Germany has been tightening for years. The war is well underway, and with it, the terror of the Gestapo. The streets are filled with suspicion. Informants lurk in the shadows, waiting for any sign of dissent to report. Fear pulses through the veins of the city, and yet there are still those who resist, who refuse to kneel to tyranny, even if it means standing alone. Hans and Sophie Scholl are not the only ones, but they are among the most audacious, and in their quiet defiance, they have found a way to speak truth to a regime that thrives on lies. They have printed their first pamphlet in the dead of night, careful to ensure no one sees them. They know that if they are caught, their lives will be forfeited. Their parents have no idea. Their friends believe them to be merely students, focused on their studies. But these quiet university students have become insurgents in the fight for a future that doesn't yet exist, a future where freedom isn't bound by the iron fist of a dictator. They speak for those who cannot. Their pamphlets, a voice for the voiceless. Outside the attic, the world is unaware of the revolution taking place in the shadows. The war rages on, and Nazi propaganda fills the airwaves, distorting reality with lies about the purity of the Reich and the righteous mission of the soldiers marching across Europe. But inside the attic, the Scholls and their small group of fellow students, the White Rose, are telling the truth, one pamphlet at a time. Each pamphlet begins with a call to the German people. Rise up, they demand. Stop the madness. Stop the slaughter. But Hans and Sophie do not simply blame the soldiers and the leaders. They address the German people themselves. They ask how long they will remain complicit, how long they will tolerate the suffering of innocent people in concentration camps, how long they will ignore the crushing weight of guilt building around them. The weight of history presses against their shoulders as they work, as the papers pile up, ready to be distributed. But each pamphlet is a gamble, and with every turn of the press, they wonder, will this one be their last? The Gestapo is relentless, and every day that passes without detection feels like a miracle. The attic is their sanctuary, but it is also their prison. They cannot tell anyone what they are doing. Not even their closest friends know the truth. To betray the secret is to betray the cause, to risk everything they are fighting for. And yet, even in the quiet of the night, in the secrecy of their actions, the danger of their defiance cannot be forgotten. Their hearts race with every creak of the floorboards, every echo in the hall below, afraid someone will hear, afraid someone will come for them. The risk is a constant companion, gnawing at the edges of their thoughts. Sophie sets down the last batch of pamphlets and wipes her brow, though there is no sweat. She is still. Her thoughts are consumed with the weight of what they are doing. Hans, too, is silent for a moment, his fingers lingering on the press, as though considering the enormity of their actions. This is no longer just an act of rebellion. This is a plea for survival. Not just their own survival, but the survival of the future they envision, a world free of the tyranny strangling Europe. The pages they print are small, but they carry the burden of truth. They reveal the lies of the Nazi regime and expose the horrors of war, of genocide. The White Rose is not an army of soldiers, nor is it a group of grand revolutionaries with a master plan. It is a handful of university students who refuse to remain silent, who have chosen to act in the face of incomprehensible evil. In their quiet rebellion, they're more dangerous than any soldier. Sophie picks up one of the pamphlets from the table and holds it between her fingers. Her eyes trace the words, the call to action, and the plea for humanity. It is a small thing, this piece of paper, but in a world where silence is death, it is the loudest thing she has ever known. This has to matter, she says softly, more to herself than to anyone else. It has to. Hans nods, but says nothing. He knows the weight she carries, knows the burden of their choices. But there is no turning back now. The moment they decided to print the first pamphlet, they made a pact with fate. There is no longer a safe place for them in this world. They are either complicit in the madness, or they are fighting to expose it. As they prepare to distribute the pamphlets, a new thought rises in Hans's mind. What if the world does not listen? What if, after all of this, nothing changes? But no matter the answer, the truth must be spoken. They cannot go back. They cannot remain silent in the face of such monstrous injustice. But as the night wears on, the attic becomes colder. The city below, unaware of their defiance, slumbers on. Hans and Sophie exchange a brief look, their resolve unshaken, their hearts bound to a cause they know will cost them everything. Tomorrow, the fight begins, and with it, the realization that this moment, this small act of resistance, may be the only thing that will ever change the course of history. February 18th, 1943. Munich, Germany. The early morning light barely makes its way through the heavy curtains of the university hall. It's cold, and the weight of the air is oppressive, as though the very building knows what's about to happen. In the midst of the quiet, a few students quietly gather, their eyes scanning the papers in their hands. Among them are Hans and Sophie Scholl, members of the White Rose, the resistance group they founded, and this morning, the words they hold in their hands are more than just ink on paper. They are a call to arms, a declaration of defiance. It's the pamphlet that will make history. The night before, in the quiet of their attic, they and their fellow students had worked tirelessly, their hands steady despite the growing anxiety gnawing at them. This pamphlet, number 6 in their series, is different. It's more urgent, more direct. The others have been a subtle critique, a call for the German people to recognize the truth, to stop the war, to resist the madness. But this one is a battle cry, a plea not just for resistance, but for revolution. It speaks directly to the German people, urging them to stand against the regime and fight for their country's soul. As Hans scans the pamphlet, the words seem to sear into his mind. The war is a catastrophe for Germany, for Europe, for humanity itself. This madness must end. The killing, the hatred, the silence. This cannot be our legacy. The people must rise before it is too late. The words ring in his ears, the echoes of their meaning reverberating in his chest. They are not just words, they are truth. Truth that the Nazi regime has worked so hard to bury. Truth that has cost countless lives. Sophie stands beside him, her hands gripping the edges of the paper. She knows what these words mean. She knows the stakes. It's a declaration that, in a single moment, could bring everything crashing down. If they are caught, if they are betrayed, the Gestapo will not hesitate. There will be no trial, no mercy. It will be the end. But she's beyond the point of fear now. Fear is a luxury they cannot afford. They slip the pamphlets from their bags and walk toward the entrance of the hall. Their hearts race, but their faces remain calm. They blend into the crowd of students milling about, the campus bustling with the quiet energy of a new day. The tension hangs between them, a shared understanding that, while they may walk among the others, they are not like them. They have chosen to live outside the lines, to challenge a system that seeks to control every aspect of life. In this moment, they are more than students. They are messengers, carrying words that could ignite a fire in the hearts of those willing to listen. Inside the hall, a group of students huddles near the stairwell, chatting in low voices, unaware of the pamphlets they are about to receive. Hans moves first, slipping a stack of papers into the hands of one of the students. His movements are deliberate, practiced, but every instinct tells him to be careful, to move swiftly. Sophie follows, passing a few pamphlets to another student. The pamphlets are small, easily hidden, but the message they carry is explosive. They are a cry of resistance, and yet, in their simplicity, they carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. As they make their way toward the back of the hall, their movements quicken. The final stack of pamphlets is ready, and their time is running out. Hans pauses for a moment, surveying the room. The weight of the moment presses against him. He can feel the eyes of the other students on him, though none seem to recognize the significance of what they're doing. They have become so accustomed to fear, to silence, that they do not even know how to respond to the truth when it is placed before them. It is easier for them to look away, easier to pretend nothing is wrong, to allow the brutality to continue unchecked. But Hans cannot look away. Sophie cannot look away. Their eyes are open to the atrocities happening just beyond their doorstep. They cannot remain silent in the face of it. They have seen the bodies, heard the cries, watched as their world has been transformed into something unrecognizable. And so, in the cold silence of this hall, they act. It's when they are at the top of the stairs, just as they prepare to leave, that it happens. A moment's hesitation, a misstep, and a stack of pamphlets slips from Sophie's hand, tumbling to the ground with a sharp, unforgiving sound. The room goes still. Hans and Sophie freeze, their hearts hammering in their chests. Their worst fear is realized. The sound is too loud. Someone has heard. Sophie's breath catches in her throat as she watches a student bend down to pick up one of the pamphlets. The room is still, the tension palpable, and for a moment, it seems as if time itself has paused. It feels like everything is hanging in the balance. The student holds the pamphlet in their hands, and Sophie can feel the weight of that small piece of paper. The decision is in that student's hands now. What will they do with it? Will they keep it? Or will they turn them in? Without thinking, Hans steps forward. He can't stand there any longer, frozen in fear. His instincts take over, and he grabs Sophie's arm, pulling her away from the scene. They move quickly, their hearts pounding, but their eyes never leave the student. They can't afford to be caught. They cannot be seen. Every step they take is a step closer to the abyss. February 22nd, 1943. Munich, Germany. The cold of the morning presses against Hans and Sophie Scholl as they sit in the sterile, white room of the Gestapo headquarters. Their hands are bound, their faces pale from the long hours of interrogation, but their spirits remain unbroken, despite the overwhelming certainty that their fate has already been sealed. The air is thick with the smell of desperation and fear, but neither of them flinches. They know what comes next. They have been caught, betrayed by one of their own, an anonymous hand that had tipped off the authorities after Sophie's accidental slip at the university. That one careless moment had turned their world upside down, transforming them from anonymous rebels into public enemies. It hadn't been a major blunder, no loud shouting or open confrontation, but it had been enough. In the end, the pamphlets they had worked so hard to spread, the words that had carried the hope of freedom and defiance, had come back to haunt them. Their cause, their mission, their belief that the truth would one day triumph, now felt like a fleeting, fragile dream. Hans sits with his back straight, his eyes focused, though the weight of exhaustion hangs heavily on him. His face is bruised from the interrogation, but his gaze never wavers. He knows the stakes. He can feel the cold hand of fate pressing down on him, and yet he has no regrets. There is no bitterness in his heart, no fear of what's to come. What they started, what they believed in, was bigger than their own lives. They had made their stand, and now they would pay the price. Sophie, too, is silent, her face calm and resolute. The young woman who had once stood in the safety of her university classrooms now faces the end with the same defiance she had carried when they first printed their pamphlets. The realization settles over her. There is no escape now. The court has already made its decision. Their arrest, their trial, everything has moved too quickly to change the outcome. The Gestapo has made their judgment. This is not a trial of facts, but a trial of beliefs. And in that trial, there is no mercy for those who dare to question the Nazi regime. Their lawyer is a nameless figure, powerless in the face of the machinery of death that has been set in motion. He tries, in vain, to defend them, but his words are drowned out by the howling winds of war, by the overwhelming power of a state that has long ceased to care about justice. He speaks of their character, their youth, their contributions to society, but none of it matters. In this room, in this moment, Hans and Sophie are not students, not idealists. They are enemies of the Reich, traitors to the fatherland, and their fate is already sealed. The trial, when it finally comes, is swift and brutal. It lasts only a matter of hours, and the verdict is already clear before it even begins. Hans and Sophie Scholl, alongside their fellow White Rose members, stand before the court, their hands shackled, their eyes locked on the faces of the judges who have already decided their guilt. They do not ask for mercy. They do not beg for their lives. In their silence, in their defiance, they speak louder than any words ever could. The courtroom is a sterile, lifeless place, filled with the hum of authority and the quiet rustle of official papers. The prosecution presents their case, citing the pamphlets as evidence of treason, of disloyalty to the state. The words they had written, the truths they had exposed, are used against them. The court is not interested in the reasons behind their actions, nor in the motives that had driven them to risk everything for what they believed in. The law is blind. In the eyes of the Nazi regime, the law is absolute. Sophie's eyes flicker briefly to Hans, and in that brief moment, they share a look. No words are spoken, but in that silent exchange, they understand each other completely. They have no illusions left. They know that this is the end, that there is no future beyond this trial. But neither of them regrets what they've done. They have fought for something more important than their own survival. They have fought for the soul of their country, for the idea of a world that values truth over lies, that seeks freedom instead of oppression. As the verdict is read aloud, the room feels heavier with each word. Guilty. Sentenced to death. The judge speaks coldly, his voice devoid of any emotion, as if this is merely another case to be processed, another set of paperwork to be filed away. There is no recognition of the courage it took to do what they did, no understanding of the cost of standing up to such an overwhelmingly powerful force. They are simply condemned, their lives snuffed out like the faintest flicker of a flame in a storm. Outside the courtroom, the world continues on, unaware of the significance of the moment. The people of Munich are distracted by the war, by their own lives, by the constant propaganda that fills the airwaves. They do not understand what the White Rose stood for, or the sacrifices they made. In their eyes, the Scholls are nothing more than traitors. But in the hearts of those who resist, in the hearts of those who refuse to bow to tyranny, the Scholls will never be forgotten. The next few days are a blur: prison, interrogation, trial. Everything moves too fast. There is no time to prepare for the end. There is no room for reflection, no opportunity to say goodbye to the world they once knew. It all ends with a single, final decision, made by an anonymous hand. The execution is swift, by guillotine. In a moment, their lives are extinguished, their bodies discarded like trash, their names erased from history. The pamphlets they printed are burned, their words erased. But the ideas they spread cannot be so easily destroyed.